Okay, this is our advanced clutch technology, or ACT, twin disc clutch that we've got running on the supercharged Coyote engine. We ran it all last season with no problems and a little bit of practice this year, so we're going to change it out with a new model. So we're ready for round one of Formula Drift Pro 2 competition here in just a week and a half. So we're going to go ahead and remove the old one. We'll measure it up to see how the wear was so we get an idea what it's like to go through a season, and we can keep an eye on the new clutch when we get it in based on that wear rate. Okay, we're going to continue to talk about our installation of an ACT twin disc clutch. One of the things that's really nice about ACT does provide a really nice set of instructions to go with the clutch. So everything you need to know is in these. So if you can read and handle some wrenches, you can install one of these clutches. It's really pretty simple to do. One of the other things that's important about in putting in this clutch, the pressure plate is match marked to the flywheel. See, the X is here and the X is here. So we want to make sure that when we put this together that you align these pieces when they're on the car. So the flywheel goes on, clutch disc goes on, and you make sure that those parts are aligned up. Now, one of the things that's also important about setting up your ACT clutch, new clutch will come set up from the factory, as we already talked about, but if you have a used clutch and it's wearing over time, you want to check the adjustment periodically and perhaps make some adjustments as needed. And the way you do that, once the pressure plate is worn a little bit, you're going to lay a straight edge across the face of the pressure plate, and then we're going to use another device, another ruler in this case, to measure the distance of the fingers of the pressure plate to the bottom edge of that straight edge. And what we want is that to be, the minimum is about 1/8 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch. The max is 1/4. The target would be 3/16 of an inch. If it's under 1/8 of an inch, you definitely want to adjust it. So in our case, I set this up earlier, but in our case we're going to measure, and it's just a fraction under 1/8 of an inch. So this clutch has a little wear on it and it's going to need some adjustment. Now, to do that, it's fairly simple. We have to remove the pressure plate. So we're going to do that just real quick here. It sticks a little bit on the pins, locating dowels. So once we get the pressure plate off, we get access to the spacers and the shims. And you can see there's a number of shims here, 5 or 6 of them in fact. So what we're going to do is we're going to go where each of the studs are, and we're going to remove just one shim from each stack. We'll pop that pressure plate back on. We'll go ahead and tighten everything down back the way we had it. And of course, as we tighten, in this case, I'm not going to fully torque it. I'm just going to tighten it for a measurement. But again, we'll go cross pattern here so that we put everything on in a proper manner, and we don't. That should about do it. The little impact was set at the lowest setting, so it's not putting anywhere near the final torque that needs to be on these studs, but it's certainly enough to bring it down onto the studs. So what we can do now, I'm going to loosen this up, and we're going to lay our straight edge across, and I'm going to set this down here, and I'm going to take another measurement. And now when I take that off, I'm actually, by taking out the one shim, we pop that out to, it's now a little more than 3/16 of an inch, not quite 1/4. So that would be a good position to be in for that. So one shim was all the adjustment that we needed. So fairly simple. Now, once we've made the adjustment for the pressure plate wear, the next step is you have to adjust for the floater. The floater sits in between the two discs, so it needs to be adjusted appropriately for the new position of the discs and the pressure plate. Also fairly simple to do. There are some adjustments. There's 3 adjusters in here for the floater, and It's simple. We loosen up the locking nut, and then what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the adjuster so it's just barely touching the spring here. So once it just makes contact, then what we're going to do is we're going to go 1/6 of a turn, one flat, and then we're just going to go ahead and lock that in right where it sits. So it's important not to go too far, just want it barely touching, just when it makes contact, then 1/6 of a turn, and that's going to put that adjustment in the proper position, and then you go ahead and do it at all 3 locations. And that would simply be it. And once you have your pressure plate and floaters properly set up, then you can take it all apart, leave your shims in place, and then be ready to mount it back on the car. You of course can do this with the flywheel in place. We happen to have this one off, made it a little bit easier for this purpose, but you can do that with everything in place. Fairly easy. Takes you literally 5 minutes to adjust your clutch, 10 minutes to adjust your clutch. Pretty simple. And again, any questions? All you have to do is refer to the ACT installation instructions and you'll be good to go. So this is a new ACT clutch that we're going to put on the Kelsey's drift car. Comes with the flywheel all there. It's twin disc, and if you buy it the whole kit with the flywheel and everything, ACT sends this already set up with the proper shims and adjustments. We'll probably go ahead and check those, but as the kit comes, it comes all nicely set up. So all we have to do is disassemble it and then install the parts. Before we get started though, we're going to clean all of the metal surfaces of the pressure plate, the floater, and the flywheel with some brake clean first, because there's a light layer of oil on there and we don't want that to interfere with proper clutch operation. Stuff got the oil coming off there with the brake clean, so we'll do that till we get a clean surface. Alright, that's looking pretty good. We'll go ahead and do the same exact thing to the floater and the flywheel. The floater is actually held in place with 3 bolts, and so we'll go ahead and just remove those. As we take the pieces up, we keep them in the right orientation, so I'm just going to take that, flip it over and lay it on the pile, and then when we go to assemble, they're pretty much all set to go, and we have them in the proper order and orientation. You have to make sure the discs go in the right orientation relative to the flywheel. And we'll leave the flywheel just sitting flat in the box because we don't want to disturb the shims that are already put on here nicely by ACT in setting up the clutch. You can see there's a spacer and then some smaller shims. Okay, so we're going to install our new ACT flywheel on the Ford Illuminator engine. And one of the things about the Ford engine is the flywheel bolts are not quite equally spaced around. There's one set of bolts that are just a little bit closer, so you have to get the flywheel in the right orientation to bolt up. So you want to get that orientation right before you push it on, because it is a press fit. So we're actually using the bolts, just sort of putting them in loosely and locating the flywheel to make sure it's in the right spot, and then we'll use a couple of bolts to just crank the flywheel onto the slight press fit. Once we get it part way there, we're going to take these other bolts back out, and we're just going to put a dab of Loctite on them just to make sure everything stays tight. Now the spec on the flywheel going to the Ford is to tighten to 20 Newton meters and then 60 degrees from there. Fortunately, the flywheel has 6 bolts on it that hold the pressure plate. one of those is 60 degrees, so it's kind of nice to have a measurement because we got 360-degree circle, 6 bolts, 6 into 360 is 60 degrees. So we're going to set up here and tighten up at 20 Newton meters first, going cross pattern. Now I'm going to use the big torque wrench, and I'm going to set it up fairly high. I'm just sort of interested to see where it kind of clicks off. But I'm going to go to 100 foot-pounds, and we'll see if that's enough to turn it. But this gives me a little bit of control over the bolts. We expect that we'll have to brace the engine too at some point. So see, we got this bolt, and we're going to tighten over to this bolt, and that'll get us 60 degrees. This one's on a little bit smaller angle, so we're going to have to be a little careful in terms of how far our 60 degrees goes. So we get the assembly put together on the alignment tool, and we're going to stick the alignment tool into the pilot bushing. Then we're going to remove some of the bolts that we left in here so we didn't lose anything, so we can then bolt up the floater. Bolts for the floater go in and get torqued to 24 foot-pounds with a little bit of thread locker on them for good keeping. We're going to go to 24 foot-pounds. Double checking. Next up is the pressure plate. We're going to remove our nuts that we left on so we didn't lose them. And we didn't want to lose the shims. They held the shims in place while we were able to fool with the flywheel. But again, it's a stack of shims and a spacer. And ACT has this set up from the factory. So it's kind of nice when you get the whole kit, it's already done for you. And there are some alignment pins on here that we've got to find the right order to. We'll go ahead and put some thread locker on everything. Pins are a little bit of a tight fit, not too bad. We'll use the nuts to pull them on. When we go to torque this down, we'll just keep going cross pattern so we tighten it down very evenly. At this point I'm just going to crank it in by hand. Make sure we go onto the pins properly.